Au Vésinet, 183 coureurs prennent le départ du 40e Paris Roubaix, l'une des plus importantes épreuves cyclistes de l'année.
At the start of the 1939 Paris Roubaix, Émile Masson, third in Paris Roubaix in 1922 and a top professional and classic winner himself, warned his son, "Once you enter the hell of the north, it's every man for himself." 60 kilometres from the finish, the younger Masson began to think that this warning from his father wasn't exactly a lot of help. He was riding in a small group of dropped riders, 3 minutes behind the leaders. His team manager's car went by, leaving him to his own devices. A man alone on the cobbles, the pavé, is a lost man, at the mercy of the wind, of crashes and of punctures. Suddenly, the young Walloon found his second wind. At Seclin, he caught the chasing group. He jumped this little group and fought his way alone up to the two leaders, Jean Majerus and Roger Lapperby, and he put them in their place. He was in charge. A puncture brought him shuddering to a halt by the roadside. 20 or more riders flashed past while he fixed his machine. Adversity just proved to be a greater spare. Riding on a rush of adrenaline, he caught and dropped those riders one by one. At Roubaix, on the elegant Avenue des Villas, the young Masson arrived in solo glory. His father fought through the crowd to congratulate him. 17 years ago, the little boy had watched his dad ride here. He remembered the tired, sooty face, the legs covered in mud, the dried-out lips. Father and son together now understood the experience that was Paris Roubaix. Four days after his victory, Masson was called up. On the 24th of May 1940, Roubaix fell to the Germans. The Nord-Pas-de-Calais region was isolated from the rest of the nation. It was now under the control of the German military. Paris-Roubaix would not be held again until after the liberation. And then on the 21st of April 1946, Masson was again on the start line. He was in the leading group as it sped through villages devastated by the war. This time his father's advice didn't help. He finished a modest 11th, well behind the winner, his Belgian compatriot Georges Claes. In the showers he recalled in a flash what his father had once whispered in his ear: "I'd love to see you win Paris-Roubaix and then die in peace 2 hours later in the knowledge that my son had become a real champion and no longer needed me to lean on." Paris-Roubaix, from father to son, a story of family devotion. The start of Paris-Roubaix is like that of any other major bike race. There's the registering at the race control, the signing of the autographs. And of course, the final massages. At last, the riders climb onto their bikes. The race is underway. Country roads, terraces of distinctive cosy-looking red brick houses, they all line the route. And then come the cobbles, the notorious pavé, great shuddering stones which shatter the peloton into tiny pieces, separating the strong from the weak, the men from the boys. Finally Roubaix, a long boulevard leading to the velodrome. The last anxious glances among the survivors before the final decision is made. After all the turmoil of a merciless course, the sprint, fought out in front of a crowd which knows and loves the sport. The skills of the lithe track rider take over from those of the tough, hard-slogging roadman. At last the verdict. The crowd envelops the winner, this man who has ridden from so far away. At the end of the last century, bike races were a Sunday day out. On the terraces, the good people of Roubaix applauded their champions, screaming, whistling, applauding. An arena was set up alongside the track. Here a fierce lion confronted a stubborn bull. Later on, they came to call the local champion, Charles Croupelant, the Bull of the North. And the great Belgian riders became the Lions of Flanders. The spectators packed into the track to applaud the exploits of the French star Jacquelin and his rival as best sprinter in the world, the black American Major Taylor. Throughout the century, many other champions would leave their mark on this northern town as well.
Sur le vélo, chacun veut être le plus costaud. Il pédale, il s'emballe, on ne voit plus que leur dos. Les couleurs de leur maillot, rouge, bleu, vert, jaune ou tango, pour le bonheur du populo. Sur le vélo, sur le vélo.
At the time of the race's beginning, Roubaix was a fast-growing industrial town, capital of France's woolen industry. Its economy dominated by a handful of powerful families. The life of a worker was terrible, labouring 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, for a meagre pay packet. When they weren't at the factory, the women carried on working the wool at home. The north was also the land of coal mines. The whole population existed under the ever-present threat of disaster, the dread of explosions and cave-ins. Throughout this testing week of ceaseless drudgery, Sunday was always eagerly anticipated, the day of fetes, of celebration and of sport. They flocked to the bike races for entertainment and sometimes as a focus for their protests, as in 1906, when a fire damp explosion sparked off a strike which brought the miners out onto the streets. Cycling was a social medicine, a distraction, at least that's how two local notables, Théodore Vienne and Maurice Prenet, promoters at the velodrome, saw it. They decided to organise a big race which would link Roubaix with the nation's capital and got the support of the daily sports paper Le Vélo. The journalist Victor Breyer was given the task of reconnoitring the route. He left Paris full of enthusiasm, but after Amiens it started to rain, and that rain became a sea of mud, dotted with uneven cobbles. Exhausted, feeling like his brains had been shaken from his head, he said to the organisers, "Drop this project, it's stupid." Nonetheless, on the 29th of April 1896, 45 professionals and 6 local amateurs from the towns around Roubaix put their signatures to the signing-on sheet in a room of the Café Gillet, next to the Bois de Boulogne. The first winner was the German rider Joseph Fischer in 9 hours and 17 seconds. The big favourite, Maurice Garin, finished third. Paris-Roubaix resembled the working day of the coal miner, the same toil, the same suffering. When the riders spilled onto the finishing track, their faces covered in mud and sweat, they looked just like miners coming back to the surface after long hours toiling underground. The winner of Paris-Roubaix is a role model, just like the legendary Roubaisian worker named Guy Monpré, who started work at 10 years of age, raised 10 children and did it all on his own, without ever asking anyone's help. This man, cited as an example to generations of workers, was a hero, a real man, a tough man. Paris-Roubaix exalts such qualities, showcasing the exploits of the convicts of the road. (1907), Mosdella, a little village in Flanders. A young farm labourer has decided to compete in Paris-Roubaix. It's his first big race. He's named Cyril van Oat.
Comme j'étais très jeune encore, je suis allé voir l'arrivée de cette fameuse course de Paris-Roubaix. Et là, j'ai vu et constaté que ces personnes-là étaient des phénomènes, mais qui n'avaient que 2 bras et 2 mains comme moi. Et je me suis dit, bah, dites, moi, je voudrais aussi faire ça plus tard. Pourquoi pas? Mais il y avait un grand mais, il fallait un vélo. Alors, ça m'a duré des années parce que je recevais que de centimes et de francs. À cette époque-là, ça m'a duré 5-6 ans avant d'avoir la fameuse somme pour devenir propriétaire d'un vélo. La bicyclette étant ma propriété, j'ai été ce jour-là le plus heureux, le plus riche de la terre.
This shy and docile Flamand looks out of place among all these great riders. Even his bike is wrong, assembled in haste from bits and pieces. At the time, Paris-Roubaix was still run with pacers. The champions had the right to employ groups of pacemakers who would take turns in aiding them across different sections of the route. But Van Oat rode the race on his own, unaided. The team, sponsored by the La Française bicycle factory, was dedicated to the service of the Giorgio brothers, but it was the sheer class of this unknown which determined the race. Van Oat was the very incarnation of Paris-Roubaix itself. Rough, tough, big-hearted. All alone without pacers, Cyril van Hovaert finished just a minute behind the Frenchman at Georges Passeroux. He'd done it without any food and on 1 bottle of water. But the next year, to the great delight of his fellow Belgians, he won. Over the years, Roubaix had to get used to this annual invasion from across the border, for Van Hovaert's victory served as a calling card for all the great Belgian riders who would follow in his wake and make their own mark on the greatest of all cycling classics. It was this victory by a humble farm labourer which confirmed that cycling, once the pastime of the well-to-do, had solidly established itself as the great sport of the working class. It would produce men like the Pélissier brothers. 80 years after Van Hovaert's victory, to everyone's surprise, another unknown won Paris-Roubaix, Dirk de Mol. De Mol's victory was a victory for all of us, showing that sport is the great leveller, that modest man can rise to the big occasion. De Mol's triumph was of all our childhood dreams come true. De Mol was modest, a humble young man with big blue eyes and the kind of stomach which soon turns to fat if we aren't careful. Ordered up to the breakaway group in the service of his team's leaders, he seized the great opportunity which slowly unfolded before him. The break was whittled down to 7 riders, then 5, then just 2. The Swiss rider Thomas Wegmuller, a tough exponent of long breaks, and De Mol. In the sprint down the Avenue des États-Unis, Wegmuller was hampered by a plastic bag which stopped his gears from working. De Mol raised his arms in delight. He had won Paris-Roubaix for all of us, for the little man. Overjoyed, his wife told him, "Dirk, I think you'll only ever win one big race, and it will be Paris Roubaix." So it proved. He never won another classic. Great champions like Eddy Merckx and Roger de Vlamingh won lots of races, including Paris Roubaix. But for Dirk de Mol, Paris Roubaix was special, his only great victory.
Dirk is eigenlijk echt optimistisch vertrokken. Hij voelde hem goed, in een goede conditie. En Paris Roubaix is een klassieker die hem tamelijk ligt, als we van klassiekers mogen spreken. En toch een klein beetje, vooral als ik zag, als ik televisietoestel aanzette, dat hij mee was met de ontsnapping. Ja, automatisch toch in het diepst van je hart geloof je er een klein beetje in. Maar ja, je gelooft het maar als het er is. En dan nog.
Dirk, proficiat.
Today at his home, his trophy is proudly displayed. And the videocassette of his great ride is always close at hand to greet the visitors. Those the public of Paris-Roubaix wait to see, to applaud, to moan about or to congratulate are the greats. In the big national tours, the champions make their mark along the route of a time trial, at the summit of Alpe d'Huez or at the finish of a long stage in the Pyrenees. But what does it take to be a king of Paris-Roubaix? It starts the previous day. The mechanics spend a lot of time getting the bikes ready, for these fragile machines face the toughest day of the year. Back in the days when it was big bicycle factories rather than companies from outside cycling which sponsored the big teams, Paris-Roubaix served as a punishing proving ground for both bicycles and tyre firms. The brutal pounding of the cobbles would soon sort out any design flaws, and the manufacturers knew that victory here was the best kind of publicity they could get for the quality of their wares. Everything is ready. The princes and the kings enter the scene. This is the triple winner of the race between 1978 and 80, Francesco Moser. He's the last big conqueror of the event. He rides as easily over the cobbles as he does on smooth roads. Well muscled, perfectly proportioned. He's able to ride head down across these awful roads, never quitting his pursuit-like position. Stretched on his bike, he concentrates on his solo effort, his body rock steady. Rather than launch a series of sudden attacks, he prefers simply to set a blistering pace and win the event. Other times, another king of Paris-Roubaix, the first man to score a hat-trick between 1909 and 1911, was a rider named Octave Lapise, nicknamed Curly. Slim-built, athletic, never distracted by the applause of the roadside spectators, for good reason. He was almost deaf. He was a racing cyclist against the wishes of his father, who accused him of wasting his time and made him work by his side for 5 hours every morning and 7 hours each evening. Whenever he went out training, his money was stopped by his father. On the eve of Paris-Roubaix, he asked for advice from one of the more experienced riders, Eugene Christophe, who encouraged him. "Don't worry about the race. As strong as you are, you're certain to finish in the first 5. And so it proved in the sprint. Lapise easily beat the favourite, Louis Tressellier. Just as much at ease during the big tours as in the classics, Lapise founded the line of great French champions. But the Great War claimed the life of Curly Lapise. On the 14th of July 1917, he was killed in an aerial duel above Pont-à-Mousson. The 1914-18 war devastated northern France. Fields pounded into a barren moonscape, trees smashed to firewood, and their homes destroyed. That's why they called it the Hell of the North. It was a fearsome nickname, which would soon be transferred to Paris Roubaix. The race's second hat-trick in 1931 to 1935, that of the Flemish ace Gaston Rebry, the Bulldog, Rebry was not an all-rounder like Lepise. He was a specialist, a rider born to smash his way over the cobbles. We see him here in the 1934 Tour of Flanders, agile, decisive, flicking from one cobble to another, instinctively picking the best line. Rebry loved these cobbles. Crouched over his bike, handlebars firmly gripped, he had the perfect build for Paris Roubaix. Well muscled, stocky, he charged into the cobble sections and seemed to come out at the other end riding faster than ever before. When the cycling season ended, Rebry was a flax merchant, and it was said he earned more that way than through cycling. He looked after his money well, bought one house after another, and finally opened his own bar. Fausto Coppi, the Campionissimo, the champion of champions, only won Paris-Roubaix once in 1950, but his victory entered into legend as one of the greatest rides ever. He lined up at the start with just one thought in his mind: to win. He decided to take a firm grip on the race by attacking on the long climb away from Doullens, a hill which in those days so often set the stage for the final outcome. On the exposed plateau, after the climb, the bunch split into a series of echelons, fighting the fearsome wind. The favourites were surprised by Coppi's attack. Louis Mbobé and Rik van Steenbergen desperately clawed their way back up to the Italian's wheel, rejoining him just before the feeding station at Arras. But Coppi was soon attacking again. With a few rapid pedal strokes, he quickly reeled in Chiardis and Dio, who had been clear. Chiardis was the first to be dropped. Dio clung on doggedly. He wasn't a man to give up easily, but this day Coppi was extraordinary, at the very zenith of his career. Coppi finished 3 minutes ahead. Magnier, the triple winner of the Tour of Flanders, came in 5 minutes in arrears, and the clock had ticked by 7 minutes before the great Rik van Steenbergen finished. Despite his frail build, Coppi was never ever afraid of Paris-Roubaix, a great champion who respected and won the Queen of the Classics. Paris-Roubaix 1952 is vividly remembered for the clash of the titans between Fausto Coppi and Rik van Steenbergen. The Belgian was a huge man, a Hercules. His rude good health enabled him to switch easily from the smoke-filled indoor tracks of the winter six-day circuit to the rough and tumble of the early season classics. Coppi was away in the lead with Kubler and Dupont, seemingly headed for another great victory, but with a tremendous solo effort, Van Steenbergen pounded his way up to join them. Coppi immediately attacked. He launched a ferocious move. Kubler was the first to be shaken off, soon after Dupont punctured. Rik and Fausto were now racing side by side. The hell for the Belgian was just beginning. Coppi knew that to win he had to finish alone, for at that time Van Steenbergen was nearly unbeatable in a sprint. On the hill out of Hem, Coppi realised he could not drop the Belgian. He turned, tapped him on the shoulder and told him it was his turn now to do some work. They arrived at the velodrome. And before a huge crowd, Van Steenbergen was going for a very long sprint. He had put himself in the perfect position to win the race by several lengths. The packed velodrome at Roubaix had witnessed a great edition of the event. And Rik won, as he would become known, had won it for Belgium. He had beaten the great Italian Campionissimo, Fausto Coppi. Now to another great hero of the race, Rik van Looy, nicknamed the Emperor of Herentals. He of sardonic smile, huge chest, enormous thighs, and winner in 1961, 62 and 65. Surrounded by a team of rugged and devoted Flamands, the famed Red Guard, Rick's attention was focused on one thing, the single-day classic races. 3 times he won Paris Roubaix with the same strategy. His teammates staked out the ground, and when the time was right, Rick would be perfectly placed to make his move, easing clear with a small group of 3 or 4 riders who were only too happy to still be in his company, rather than struggling far behind the rest. Rick dominated them, set the agenda, and won. Between Paris and Roubaix, Rick van Looy was truly at home. The most incredible, the greatest, the strongest, Eddy Merckx. Nearly 30 years later, we still recall in every detail his fantastic exploit of April the 13th, 1970. That year, the hill was steep for everyone, except for Eddy Merckx. Despite the handicap of 3 punctures, Merckx triumphed over a coalition of exceptional champions, Eric and Roger de Vlamingh, Eric Le Mans, and André Dierix of the formidable Flandria team. The weather conditions were terrible. Torrential rain, snow, the cobbles slippery, puddles as big and deep as lakes. With 30 kilometres to go, Merckx surged clear alone. De Vlamingh and Le Mans chased desperately and scrabbled back up to him, but in vain. Merckx, who rumour had it was considering making this his final season, launched another devastating attack. At the finish, the gaps were enormous. De Vlamingh was second, but more than 5 minutes in arrears. On this day, the man they call the Cannibal surpassed all the legendary rides of the past, beating his rivals, the atrocious conditions and the pitiless course at the same time. Now this is the race record holder, Roger de Vlamingh, winner 4 times in 1972, 74, 75 and 77. The man they call the Gitan, the Gypsy, was an outsider in a Belgian totally devoted to Eddy Merckx. A real character and individualist, de Vlamingh literally sprinted across the pavé, leaping like a gazelle from one cobble to the next. For a long time, Roger de Vlamingh had a single fixed idea: to hang on to Eddy Merckx for as long as possible. At this time, he had no other choice. In 1975, the 2 champions reached the Roubaix Velodrome side by side, along with De Meyer and Dierix. Eddy Merckx launched the sprint down the back straight. The Gypsy jumped onto his wheel and timed his effort to perfection. He swept by in the final 100 metres to put the great man in his place. These 2 champions shared Paris-Roubaix, each playing his role to perfection. Eddy Merckx, an adored young prince, victim of the highwayman, Roger de Vlamingh, cutthroat and master of the cobbles. From one edition to the next, cooperation and rivalry between these 2 great men of the pavé told the tale. During the 60s, road improvements taking place all over northern France threatened the very character of the race. It was in danger of degenerating to a mere kermesse, always finishing in a sprint. Bulldozers were marching across the landscape, a sea of bitumen that was obliterating the pavé. One by one, the cobble sections of the route disappeared, and in 1968, the organisers and the press decided to take a firm grip of the problem. The search was on for roads which would recreate the hell of the North, and it was Albert Bouvet and Jan Slabinski, both ex-champions, who were given the task. Slabinski, a man of the North, a working-class man of Polish extraction, a one-time miner.
C'était méconnu du public, et évidemment, ils m'ont demandé pour leur conseiller et pour voir s'il n'y en avait pas d'autres. Alors, ma foi, je me suis mis en route avec mon vélo, puis je l'ai trouvé quand même pas mal.
On the 7th of April 1968, the riders cursed Jan Slabinski.
Vous me paraissez très marqué par ce Paris-Roubaix.
Ah ben, je ne sais pas si je suis seul, mais alors, dis donc, les 30 derniers kilomètres, j'ai rien vu.
Pourtant, vous êtes à l'origine de ce parcours, Jean.
Oui, mais enfin, ça ne veut rien dire pour moi. Hein. Et c'est très difficile. Je crois quand même que c'est quand même très dur.
Si vous deviez refaire le parcours, est-ce que vous choisiriez le même?
Eh bien, je pense quand même que la preuve a été faite. C'est quand même un grand champion qui gagne et tous les plus costauds sont devant. Donc le parcours, ça prouve quand même que c'est un parcours difficile et puis c'est un parcours valable.
All of them except Eddie Merckx, whose glorious victory put the seal of approval on the new route and restored the true character of this great race and the links with its great predecessor, Cyril van Ovart. Paris-Roubaix saved its reputation with these meatloaf cobbles and medieval farm tracks. Cycle racing refound its youth on these truly diabolical roads. The crossing of the bone-shaking Wollers of Arenberg demands from the riders the kind of effort and courage associated with an earlier era, and it thrills the public, drawing huge crowds every year.
Allez, Abine! Allez, allez, allez! Le Max. Oh. Il n'y a pas de Foufou. Foufou est encore par derrière. Oh, yo, 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 yo. Ils devraient se mettre du côté, les voitures. Hein. C'est très mauvais ici. Hein. Motard, qu'est-ce qu'il a pris? Vous avez vu le vent qu'il a fait? Hein? Le motard, il a fait un rude vent. Oh, yo, yo.
People of this region like their beer with a good froth on top and their coffee strong. Paris-Roubaix is part of the local character, something looked forward to every year. The people of the north watch the riders hammer across this section like a flood. It's all the history of the region which is unfolding. The people of a region cursed with hard times come to watch Paris-Roubaix and forget the shut-down factories, the recession, the condemned housing and the social depredation. Social distinctions again raise their head, but it's often hard to distinguish between the competitors and the ordinary bike riders who flock to see them. The public adores the riders, urges them on. After all, they too are workers.
Au passage à niveau fermé des 20 Malmaison, 7 concurrents échelonnés se retrouvaient groupés en tête et se réconfortaient avant d'aborder les 40 derniers kilomètres de l'enfer du Nord.
Braving all obstacles, the racing cyclist is unstoppable, even by locomotives. It's lucky that the barriers are there to save them by the skin of their teeth. Paris-Roubaix makes men great, creates myths, outdoes legends, But Paris-Roubaix is also a race full of bad luck, of injustice, and sporting injustice is the worst kind. Paris-Roubaix 1930. A very young man is shaking the race up with his attacking riding. He makes it all look so easy. Jean Maréchal is just 20 and, as they say, has everything going for him. He leads easily over the top of the climbs. He doesn't miss any opportunity to underline that he is the best. He is seen by everyone as the man to beat. He never stops attacking and finds himself alone in the lead with the Belgian rider Julien Verweyke. For several kilometers, Maréchal sets the hardest pace. 6 kilometers from the end, Verweyke stops working altogether. Maréchal is annoyed by the Belgian's tactics, and when Verweyke tries to jump him, he's furious. He chases him down and he catches him, and then they are shoulder to shoulder. Julien Verweyke crashes. He gets up, jumps back on his bike, but he will never get back on. Maréchal has won his Paris-Roubaix, arriving solo as he dreamed. Verweyke takes his turn to cross the finishing line. Furious, he accuses the Frenchman of having pushed him off. Maréchal protests his innocence. Verweyke fell on his own. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses who could verify the truth. But Verweyke rode in the colours of the major Alcyon Cycles team, which Maréchal was riding for a small Parisian cycle builder. After much debate, Jean Maréchal was relegated to second place. From that moment, it was as if his whole existence was relegated. He was never again to show the easy grace and sheer style he had shown in his very first Paris-Roubaix. Paris-Roubaix 1934, another race, another injustice. 10 kilometres from Roubaix, Roger Lapabie, the champion of France, is away in the company of the two Belgians, Gaston Rebry and Jean Wouters. His ultimate victory is not in much doubt. But Lapabie punctures. Catastrophe. His team car isn't there. He carries on riding for a few hundred metres, but is losing ground. Lapabie knows he is about to lose Paris-Roubaix. He sees a woman's bicycle at the side of the road and swaps to that, then changes again to a spectator's racing machine. He sweeps in front down the Avenue des Villas. Several minutes later, Gaston Rebry, supported by his team manager Francis Pellissier, demands that Lapabie be relegated for infringing the rules.
Parce que Lapabie, il est disqualifié, mais... Ah, il est disqualifié, pourquoi? Quel motif? Là, il changeait le vélo.
And Lapabie paid dearly for the strict regulations, which in that era forbade riders to change bikes. Each rider was invisibly tied to his own bike like a dog on a lead. The machines were carefully examined at the start, sealed and controlled.
Ce n'est pas un peloton, c'est un véritable bataillon cycliste qui s'élance vers le nord pour le 47e Paris-Roubaix, réputé la course cycliste la plus rapide du monde. La fine fleur du cyclisme routier de France, de Belgique et d'Italie a pris sa place parmi les 216 partants. Vainqueur l'année dernière et détenteur du record de l'épreuve, Van Steenbergen précède l'Italien Magni. Robic chasse très fort. Mojica s'échappe à l'Essen. À son tour, Mahé surgit du peloton, rejoint les deux leaders.
A third great injustice in the history of the race was an error of organisation. We're now in 1949. André May is in the lead, several hundred yards from the velodrome entrance with Jesus Mujica and Franz Lehnen. A policeman misdirects them to a road which leads behind the stadium. Mujica crashes, Lehnen and May clamber over the press stands to get onto the track, and it is May who wins the two-up sprint. At this moment, the chasing group arrives. The bunch is led by Serge Coppi, the brother of Fausto, who is himself in the group. Fausto has a great affection for his less able younger brother who lives in his shadow. May has won, but Fausto encourages his brother to lodge a protest because May has not covered the proper course. May has already ridden his lap of honour and been to the showers when he discovers that he has been relegated to Serge Copy's benefit. The debate lasts for 9 months. The French Federation reinstates May as winner. In August 1949, Copy pushes the Italian Federation into appealing to the International Federation, who decides to place the two riders equal. The injustice of Paris Roubaix involves many who have missed out on victory. In 1981, after winning Paris Roubaix 25 years after Lewis and Bobet, Bernard Hinault spoke lucidly of his hatred of this event. A course which is too dangerous, roads which are too stupid. While the great triumph, crashes, punctures and mechanical failures smash the dreams of the lesser men. Riders become mechanics, fixing things, changing wheels and repumping tyres. The riders set off again, wheel to wheel, for every rider wants to at least finish this terrible event, even if they do so in front of empty grandstands from which the public have long since gone. Many, though, are destined never to ride through the gates.
Viens ici parce que je ne voudrais pas, Alain, qu'on gêne les coureurs derrière qui terminent, car ça a été vraiment dur.
Oui, ça a été très dur, surtout je suis tombé au mauvais moment parce qu'on a attrapé le vent de côté et puis j'étais dans la dernière bordure, il a fallu revenir et puis c'était très dur, quoi. Et ici en fait parcours j'ai crevé quand j'étais avec Van Springel. On allait peut-être revenir, je sais pas s'il est revenu Van Springel. Et non, et j'ai crevé, alors j'avais pas de roue, j'ai dû attendre une roue au moins pendant 5 minutes et puis j'ai fini avec le pédalier qui coinçait, alors...
Vous savez qu'il y a maintenant, je crois, quelque chose comme 26 minutes qu'Elimert est arrivé. Vous saviez qu'il avait gagné déjà, on vous le disait.
Oui, j'attendais sur le parcours, oui.
Paris-Roubaix is a dangerous race. It has pity on no one, not even a champion of the world. One year, Eddy Merckx crashed heavily, badly damaging his shoulder on the Wallers-Arenberg section. The modern story of Paris-Roubaix is that it remains almost prehistoric in character. It reminds us of the golden days when bike riders were true pioneers, explorers, off to find their fortune, despite all the perils en route. The Paris-Roubaix rider has not changed. 100 years on, he fights, ignoring everything thrown at him. His sights set on the goal of reaching the velodrome. A dozen or so kilometres from Roubaix, Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle has escaped with the Italian Franco Ballerini.
course. Duclos est capable de faire l'extérieur. Duclos qui se met en danseuse. Ballerini le surveille. Duclos démarre.
Bien joué. Bien vu. S'il prend la pédalier.
Gilbert Duclos-Lazal opens up the sprint. As the line approaches, Ballerini moves onto his shoulder. At the line, Ballerini believes he has won. But this time there's no injustice. There's a photo finish to confirm Duclos-Lazal as the winner. A French winner awaited for so long. Back in 1978, at the start of his first Paris Roubaix, his team captain Jean-Pierre Donguillaume had told him, if you manage to arrive at the velodrome before they lock the doors, then you can say you are a true racing cyclist.
Regardez comme c'est beau. Et madame, oh là là, que c'est beau cette image. Ah, ils en reviennent pas. Oh, je sais pas ce qu'il nous a fait là, mais c'est pas possible. Ah, elle est pas belle cette famille. Ah, il y a des larmes.
Paris-Roubaix is not only a story about fathers and sons, but of the mutual admiration of the best and the most modest riders in the peloton.
Dans la traversée de Saint-Quentin, c'est la flash information.